Okay, now we can officially start. Parshat Vetchanan from Norin, Pninei, or 5782. I want to talk about the phrase mighty hand or mighty arm. The word in Hebrew, yad, can mean hand or arm. And we have it twice in this week's Parsha. Once at the beginning of the Parsha, the very first verses, talks about Moshe pleading with Hashem to go to the land of Israel. I pleaded with Hashem at that time, saying, O Lord Hashem, Adonai Elohim, Ata hechalota l'harot abdacha. You have begun to show your servant et godladcha, at your greatness, ve'yadcha hachazaka, and your mighty hand. Asher mi'el b'shamayim v'aretz asher yasek ma'asech k'voratecha. Whose powerful deeds no God in heaven and earth can equal, and even claims they're a God. So we have here the Moshe bringing his prayer, asking Hashem to let him own the land. He starts it with this interesting phrase that Hashem, let your servant, let Moshe already see the first of your works, of your greatness, and your first of your mighty hand. This is interesting, because here it says the mighty hand is Moshe only first saw the beginning of it now. That's what it sounds like. This is right after Moshe and the Jewish people conquered the eastern side of the Jordan River. So Moshe is basically saying, Hashem, you already started letting me come into the land of Israel. You let me see the beginning of your greatness. So I want to, please let me into the other half. I want to see all of your greatness, all of your mighty arm. Now that makes sense until we look just 2 chapters later and see a quote from the 10 Commandments, also in this week's Parsha. Observe the Shabbos day and keep it holy as your God Hashem commanded you to. 6 days you shall labor and do no work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath. 6 days you shall labor and do all work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to you, Hashem. You should do no work, you, your son, your daughters, your male feeding slave, your male or female slave, your ox or your donkey, or any of your cattle, or the stranger in your settlements, so that your male and female slaves may rest as you do. And then the last line of the commandment, the 4th commandment, says like this: remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and your Hashem, your God Hashem, freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore your God has commanded you to observe the Shabbos day. Here it says that Hashem took us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. So how can Moshe, 40 years later, say, I only have begun now, 40 years, seeing the beginning of your mighty hand, when you conquered the eastern side of the Jordan River, when we started inhabiting, started living, in the Jewish people started living in the land, at least the eastern side, Reuven and Gad and half of Manasseh. I started seeing it, Moshe said in chapter 3. Again, hachalota, I started seeing it. But here, Moshe says, it sounds like I saw it 40 years ago. I saw Hashem's mighty hand. So we could try to understand that mighty hand, mighty hand means action. I saw someone suggested. And 40 years ago, we saw Hashem's action taking us out of Egypt. And now Hashem is, in chapter 3, Moshe is referring to another action of bringing them to Israel, and that action, he started seeing the beginning of that action. Hashem started bringing them to Israel. Moshe already saw the conquering of the eastern side of the Jordan, already saw how Hashem defeated the Canaanim who went to war with us. That's one possible answer. Another, to explain how it's only the beginning of the mighty hand. It's a new mighty hand. Another suggestion is that mighty hand doesn't always look like this, a victorious hand. A mighty hand might look like this. We know when someone finishes a race, he intuitively puts up his hand, like this man. I finished, woohoo! Meaning that the finish is the mighty hand. Moshe says in the sixth Parshat, I began to see the mighty hand. I began to see you taking us out. I began to bring us to the land, the end, the finish goal. Accordingly, we would go back to chapter 5, and understand this verse at the end when it says, remember you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Hashem freed you from there with a mighty hand, an outstretched arm. We have to read this. They freed you there in order to show you at the end his mighty hand in the land of Israel, in order that you should establish a society different than Egypt, where those people are not slaves forever, where even the servants get to rest. Here we'd have to understand the expression biyad chazakah with this new definition. Not that he saw that mighty hand in Egypt, but he took us out with the goal of showing us the mighty hand, of making a new society that people have, even the lowest of society who have to sell themselves to survive, still get a day of rest. In this case, the mighty hand is the land of Israel, which maybe in this map you could try to say maybe even looks kind of like a mighty hand. And the Hashem says, I'm taking you to the land, the mighty hand. And Moshe pleased to Hashem, I already saw the beginning of the conquer of this land, of the eastern side. Now I'd like to go and see the western side. Moshe did not, whether his prayer was not accepted, but today we are privileged to live and visit and see daily miracles in the land of Israel, God's mighty hand. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. See you next week.